probably like music. Even if it isn't your whole life, you enjoy it at least a little bit. It's so intrinsically human and impossible to escape. It follows us pretty much everywhere that we go. We all have our favorite artists, and their work resonates with each of us for different reasons, some more so than others. I've always been a big music enjoyer myself, having albums and artists that I can attribute to pretty much any phase of my life. 5 Seconds of Summer for my middle school years, Fall Out Boy for high school, Hot Mulligan and the Front Bottoms for my freshman year of college. But now, approaching my junior year of college, an album that has earned the spot as all-time favorite is Jane Remover's Census Designated. It's an album about expansiveness, abandonment, and cannibalistic obsession. It's about gender identity, dysphoria, sex, and sadness. It resonates with me so personally, not only in theme, but in aesthetic, artistic direction, inspiration, and emotional resonance. But before watching this, if you haven't listened to Census Designated yet, go do that. If you only take one thing away from this video, please just listen to the album front to back. One time. This video and its themes will mean so much more to you once you've actually experienced the album firsthand. If this really is your first time hearing about Census Designated, then I should probably introduce you to the person who made it. If you don't already know, Jane Remover is a New Jersey-born artist and producer who got started by creating mixes under the alias Leroy on SoundCloud in 2021, creating the genre Daryacore, which is mostly sample-based EDM music. Their other notable alias at the moment is Venturing, an indie rock shoegaze band that initially had lore, but the story behind it was eventually dropped. They release music under various other pseudonyms, something they continue to do frequently, but Leroy and Venturing are their most prominent side projects. There are currently 3 studio albums under the name Jane Remover: Frailty in 2021, Census Designated in 2023, and Revenge Seekers in 2025. Before Census Designated was released, Jane Remover publicly came out as a transgender woman in 2022 and changed their main alias to what it is now. As of 2025, they identify as non-binary and don't have a pronoun preference, but current journalism covering Revenge Seekers uses strictly they/them pronouns to refer to them, and I will be doing the same for consistency. This aspect of their identity is also really important in analyzing the themes of Census Designated, which is why I bring it up now. Census Designated as an album is inspired by a few different things, mainly a road trip that Jane took to Seattle, resulting in a self-described near-death experience. There are a lot of various horror elements brought into the picture, as well as other influences like the music of Ethel Cain. Jane's road trip to Seattle was a realization for them. They said that it felt like exactly the picture they were trying to paint for the album, going into the middle of nowhere for no reason and putting themselves in a situation where they literally thought they would die, heart beating in their chest, feeling like their life was on the line, and it was completely self-inflicted. This experience, one that was their own fault at the end of it all, most accurately captured the ideas of Census Designated. Horror is evident as well in both the lyrics and the visuals of the album, one of the stills from the photoshoot being a direct reference to Cutting Moments, a 25-minute horror film from 1997. It's a brutal watch, and I personally couldn't finish it since it's quite gory and relies on the concept of self-mutilation. So if you do choose to go watch it, just keep that in mind. I've linked it below in case you're curious. The Ethel Cain inspiration, on the other hand, is also very apparent on even a first listen. You can really hear this if you've listened to Preacher's Daughter and absorbed pretty much any of its themes or motifs. Both projects have very similar vibes as well, and in my opinion, do evoke similar feelings. There's a liminal aspect to both of them, depicting a secluded rural place seeming to exist quietly behind its closed doors. Despite each subject's respective isolation, they exist in their own cycles of domestic abuse, sexual exploitation, and various other traumas. These inspirations are a unique yet relatively unsurprising combination. They not only strengthen the concept for the vibe, as it's put, but they also enhance the thematic elements and the imagery present in both albums. Just a quick note before getting into this next section. When Jane has talked about Census Designated, they've described it as a concept album. When none of the events or metaphors of their lyrics have actually happened to them personally, they're expressing anxieties and intrusive thoughts that they have had in the past. The album relies on a suspension of reality, so when I refer to Jane in this next section, I'm talking about the character they play and the fictionalized version of themselves that they've written for the sake of expression. Census Designated is, like I said before, a concept album that takes place over the course of one night, starting with Cage Girl, Cam Girl at dusk and ending with Contingency Song at dawn. It covers a slew of themes that blend together both sonically and lyrically over the course of the album, and they're all tied together through those respective elements. A major theme that sets a lot of the album up initially is the ideas of desperation, isolation, and rejection, particularly the push and pull that comes with these 3 feelings combined. For example, the song Backseat Girl. There's this desperation of trying to keep a partner around, the isolating experience of this, guilting them to stay with you when they don't want to, and the back and forth of who has control in a romantic relationship. This theme is expressed lyrically in many of the tracks on the album, but is really nailed in its presentation. The desperation comes through Jane's line delivery, the struggle of doing things because you need to, because there's some force holding it over your head, whether that's internal, from a partner, or some sort of societal expectation. The idea of desperation really carries through the other themes of the album, connecting them together and causing an emotional and conceptual blend. Another major and very evident theme is the discussion of the music industry from the perspective of an artist who has potential and drive, but no proper external support. The title track, my personal favorite, covers scenarios of intimacy and sexuality that are confirmed to be an allegory for making music and the other kinds of exploitation that comes with that. Jane, or the character that they're playing here, feels as if they've had to exploit themselves and do things that they weren't happy or comfortable doing to get where they are now. They feel like a performer both in romance and in the reality of their career. It uses sexuality and eroticism to overstate this, clear once again in the lyrics and in their delivery. This theme is also present in songs like Holding a Leech, with the line about picking up a guitar despite not really wanting to. The idea of being forced into something by your own internal pressure is really loud in a lot of these lyrics. And this is something that I think a lot of people can relate to, where once you're good at something, you become pigeonholed into that one thing. You have to keep doing it even if you have no drive for it, because it's what you're good at. Census Designated continues using romantic relationships and making music relatively interchangeably, with one being easily representative of the other and vice versa throughout the project. Bouncing off of the relationship aspect of the album, Census Designated also generally covers a lot of intense and violent acts in the name of love, in a sexual, physical, and emotional sense. In Jane's own description of the album, they mention that these aren't things that they've personally experienced. But regardless of that fictionalized element, it's still supposed to represent a real feeling, and the fear and the possibility of these situations actually manifesting themselves within an interpersonal relationship. Backseat Girl, once again, brings out the idea that it isn't just this fictional partner who's being violent in some way, but also Jane, through controlling and manipulative behavior. The idea of backseat driving in a relationship and directing the driver where to go. This song can also be interpreted as taking a back seat and letting a partner take control, but I choose personally to interpret it as representing both of these things at the same time, because I find that to be a little bit more of a complex and deeply layered view of the story. Jane expresses not only the feeling of trapping someone else in a relationship, but being trapped yourself, to the point of feeling like an injured animal. They highlight the cyclical push and pull of a toxic or even violent and abusive relationship, describing the metaphorical vomit and blood that comes with a connection that feels both dire and completely destructive, regardless of if they stay or not. Still talking about relationships and the toxicity that can come with them, especially when one or both parties are in some way desperate, there's a difficult to digest sexual theming that comes to play in almost every single track on the album. In songs like Cage Girl, Cam Girl, Fling, the title track, and especially Video, there are aspects of these songs that are attempts at devastating, self-exploitative eroticism on Jane's end. The feeling of being on display, all eyes on you, and forced to indulge in some kind of sexual output that you simply don't want to engage in is so prominent. The explicit nature of songs like Cage Girl, Cam Girl, Video, Idling Somewhere, Contingency Song, and honestly most of the album, all in various ways, brings out such an uneasy but weirdly realistic feeling. They have these deep and uncomfortable sexual metaphors and descriptions of disturbed and somewhat violating experiences that it can be really difficult to put yourself in as a listener. These hypotheticals that Jane acts out genuinely cause such immense discomfort once you really give the lyrics a listen, some of them so buried in the noise that you have to read them as you go. On top of that, the scenarios like this are somewhat ambiguous. As the audience, we have to determine the levels of both consent and coercion happening at any time. And to me, this is so compelling. It's relatable in both a literal and in a metaphorical sense. Riffing off of sex and sexuality as a theme, there's also the use of pornography, trans chasers, and emotional detachment. A combination of these themes are present in songs like Video, Fling, and the title track, among others. There are parallels and metaphors of catching someone you love consuming porn that looks eerily like yourself, the over-sexualization of the self, the exploitation that comes with making any kind of vulnerable art, and the detachment that someone might feel from all of those things combined. This particular combination of themes is freakishly relatable, since I often feel like my online presence is a performance. It feels exploitative and almost sexual in a way, even when the content I post doesn't go down that route. The idea of emotionally detaching yourself, making content to appease others, and being stuck in a loop of your own perception can feel pornographic, like some kind of fetish. For those who don't know, calling someone a chaser refers to a pattern of behavior that points to a person going after trans people sexually or romantically based solely on the fact that they're trans. It's an actual fetish and something a lot of us go through when encountering cisgender partners. Obviously, not all cis people who date trans people are chasers, but it's a reality that many of us have to process and be aware of in our own dating lives. This theme is explored the most overtly through video, but is present in Cage Girl Cam Girl, Contingency Song, and others. It's most lyrically present, but it's so forward throughout Census Designated as a whole that it's impossible to ignore. Chasing, sexual exploitation, and pornography, literal or metaphorical, are themes that continue throughout Jane's more recent work as well. It's approached in Revenge Seekers, using Star People and Professional Vengeance respectively, which I won't talk about too much in detail. Revenge Seekers is a subject all on its own and a completely different project. I just want to point out that these themes evolve throughout Jane's body of work even now. I'd say they're overall much more confident in themselves and their expression of these particular subjects at this point, especially being further into their gender transition. So this approach is a bit different, and I think that's a really interesting thing to witness in real time. Once again, this next theme just builds off of what we've already talked about, but gender dysphoria as a concept is really strong throughout Census Designated. A lot of trans people go through phases of sexualizing themselves as compensation for their insecurities to feel desirable or loved. There's a need to feel like an object or an item before being seen as a person, since this tends to seem like it will work out better in the long run, even though oftentimes it doesn't. While this isn't explored in Jane's current work by my analysis, it was explored in their previous work from the Census Designated era. Rural Blue Walls, which is one of my personal favorite Jane Remover songs, was released as a single right before Census Designated came out and is a bonus track on the vinyl. This song is essentially a story of gender transition, talking about both the societal and internal pressures of coming out and actively changing in the eyes of others. It talks about the mental health struggles and hopelessness early people in their transition often feel. This song is the perfect midway point between Frailty and Census Designated, in my opinion, the most obvious choice for these themes outside of the Census Designated tracks. When it comes to the imagery in Census Designated, the most apparent motif is body horror. Again, using Cage Girl Cam Girl as an example, we can see the introduction of this element right at the very start of the album. This particular song explores a lot of the themes, which is why it's a good opener. It's been applicable to almost every single thing that I've analyzed up until this point, and makes a lot of sense as the start for the project, especially in hindsight. It sets the stage for what to expect for the rest of the album, so it shouldn't be shocking that it's carried throughout this entire section. The imagery of these particular body horror elements are really incredible to me because of their vagueness. It makes them so much more impactful in their abstractness, which is supported by the sonic aspects of the project. There are certain musical motifs that help carry those themes and even stray into some of Jane's other work past Census Designated. A lot of the previously mentioned themes are also present in Ethel Cain's work. Ethel Cain talks about sexual violence and exploitation, toxic and abusive relationships, gender and identity, and the expansive but sometimes wordless vibe of the American Midwest. Once giving both albums a listen, it's very clear to see what they share and how Census Designated has been so heavily influenced by it. The strongest connection between the two, besides their fabricated, isolated locations, is the desperation and desire both the character Ethel Cain and the fictionalized version of Jane demonstrate in their lyrical and sonic choices. I think it's interesting to see how Jane picked up some of the similar concepts and themings, but shifted them to be uniquely theirs. Looking back, this section has been the most difficult to write. It was actually quite hard to pick which songs fit which themes best, and a lot of them overlapped really heavily. I found myself using Cage Girl Cam Girl for almost every single theme, as well as the title track. This can be said, though, for pretty much all of the other tracks on the album, and I had to really try to pull from everything off of the album as evidence instead of just sticking to the same couple of songs that backed me up so strongly, because they all backed me up strongly. One of the incredible things about this project, like I mentioned a few times when talking about the themes in detail, is the fact that all of the themes and metaphors blend together in a way that makes them so difficult to differentiate a lot of the time. It took an in-depth analysis of the lyrics and sounds, but even then, it's still hard to tell them apart. Instead of being a weakness, though, this feels like a strength to me. This choice makes everything feel so inherently intertwined, like the subjects can't be spoken about separately through Jane's experiences and intrusive thoughts. They are, in a way, all fused together, as if Jane has felt them collectively. This also makes sense with the ideas that the album represents a singular night. This is what makes Census Designated so good. It takes a handful of indescribable feelings and chooses to keep them that way. The musical aspect of analysis isn't really something I'm qualified or necessarily super confident in. I don't have the vocabulary to really identify genres and sounds the way that some other people do, as it isn't really my strength, but I'll try with a few things that I think I can say. If Census Designated has one thing, it's a near constant building and releasing of tension. The best example of this is the title track. There's so much dissonance and build halfway through picking up its pace and then crashing with its release quickly after. The middle segment is my favorite part of the entire song and possibly even the entire album, with its emotional peak in both pacing and tone, and just in general. I struggle actually to articulate why I love that song so much. It captures the push and pull of not only a mental health episode, but a sense of helplessness due to a combination of uncontrollable elements and one's own stupid actions. It feels like desperation to achieve a goal, but having to make unsavory, uncomfortable choices to get there. Another sonic strength of the album is its use of harsh noise throughout. I had never personally been a fan of harsh noise on its own. Absolutely nothing against it, since it's expressive and valid in its own way as a genre, but I never really find myself putting it on its own. For me, this album uses the perfect amount of it for my own personal taste, and I find it to be a really compelling and enhancing aspect of the sound. It adds an emotional weight that I don't think any other sonic method could have included. And on top of that, none of these songs feel like their actual length. Every single song on Census Designated is over 5 minutes long, but none of them feel that way. Each one has enough variation that it never feels like a repeat of the same thing, and the album doesn't drag whatsoever despite being an hour and some change. There are a handful of other sonic elements present that I honestly just don't have the words for. If you're curious about what else makes this album so special to me, then that's another sign to just go listen to it yourself. Nothing I say will ever replicate the feeling. I can just analyze it with the gift of hindsight. I've been able to sit with this album and really hear it, see it, and feel it, but nothing I can say will ever amount to what the album actually is. A huge aspect of Census Designated, again, is a way that it takes complex feelings and forces you to sit there and feel them instead of telling you how. Where words fail is where music begins. So we've talked about the themes, and now we have the visuals. But before we can move on, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is the census-designated house. I hesitate to even mention it at all, because it's been requested by Jane, the label, and the people who own the property numerous times that its location is not shared. I will not be sharing any other identifiable information about it aside from the photos taken during the official census-designated photo shoot. I will not discuss it as a real-life entity any further after this section, as much as I would genuinely like to. When talking to Brendon Burton, the photographer responsible for the census-designated photos, while he spoke beautifully and kindly about Jane and the experience as a whole, he said that his one regret was leaking the location. In his words, it's not just census-designated land, it's an unforgiving landscape filled with some unfriendly people. There's a deep concern about people's safety and how respectful they've been about the property in the past. If you choose to look into the house on your own, that's fine, because the history is interesting in a weird and morbid sort of way. The house does seem to put people in a trance, a deep hyperfixation coming over many of us, myself and Burton included. However, do not try to contact anyone involved in the property. Burton mentioned that he worked with the owners to ensure his and Jane's safety during the shoot, but that it is not a safe place to visit. If you do choose to go there, you are considered a liability. Dead Air has been discouraging visits for years, and that wish needs to be honored. As someone who is deeply invested in abandoned locations, something that I'll get into a little bit more when I discuss the visual components, one of the most important aspects of urban exploring and including these things in your art is respect. Legality, debatable, but respect and safety come first for all parties involved. Just don't be weird. The last thing I want is for this album or video to be the reason that somebody gets hurt. But why are people so obsessed with this fucking house anyways? It's just an old homestead in the middle of rural America. Honestly, I think there are a few reasons, but the main one being that we just don't have that much to work with. The census-designated era has very little recorded and physical media. It does not exist on CD and is only available in a vinyl form as of 2025. It is one single photo shoot done by Brendon Burton and a single music video for the title track, which was recorded and edited by whateva. Despite this limited amount of recorded visual media, Census Designated still has an incredibly strong visual identity, and this serves it very well. Not only was it bringing in attention at its release, but it continues to bring in attention now. I hadn't personally listened to Census Designated until early 2025, and a big part of what pulled me in was the visuals. It's very clear that both Burton and whateva have an incredible eye for visuals in their respective works, showing this especially with their recent collaboration on the Vanisher movie, which you should absolutely watch if you haven't seen it yet, because it's stunning. Brendon Burton was kind enough to answer some of my questions about his work pertaining to the album over email. One of the first things that I asked about was the inspiration for the visuals. Burton mentions how he has over 100 homesteads near the census house that he keeps tabs on for his personal work, and that he was aware of this particular one about a year before actually heading out there with Jane. He also mentioned that Jane had never really explored anything abandoned like that before and called them brave for willing to make the trek out there, especially with a stranger, which I thought was very sweet. I also asked a bit about what creative freedoms he had on the project. Burton said that Jane is a pleasure to work with and gave him a lot of leeway to, quote, merge the visual worlds of his personal work with the album's narrative, which is part of why it comes across so cohesive. As a creative, having that visual freedom really helps the project carry weight in all of the right places. According to Burton, Jane designed the album layout, and he said that he was really happy with the way that they let the photos speak for themselves. I also asked about the title track music video, since I was curious about the different takes on the album and its themes. Burton said that he did not have any communication with Quedeca on this project, and in his opinion, the video is a, quote, more visceral take on the album. I found Brendon Burton's answers to my questions to be really interesting, since I'm personally really big on visuals, if that wasn't obvious, and I feel like this is a good time to take a little segue to talk about his other work. Brendon Burton, outside of Jane Remover and Dead Air Records, has a catalog of incredible independent work. Abandoned or isolated places seem to be a theme that pops up for him often, and is clearly something he's practiced and well-skilled at capturing, despite not really wanting to give me any insight onto his themes, since he says he chooses to keep them private. While I personally love the Census-designated photo shoot, it is by no means Burton's only work. There's the recent release of Vanisher and the Revenge Seekers photo shoot as well, but he has so much under his belt outside of that. While all of his work is incredible and he speaks very highly of the work he does for Dead Air, his personal work deserves just as much attention and conversation as his client work seems to receive. As someone who also wants to work with musicians to help them achieve their vision, someone who strives to be in Brendon's position in the future, I really hope that my work outside of that exists in other people's minds as well. I want to be sure he gets the credit where it's due, and I'm really happy to see that he does get plenty of love and attention on social media. I just really wanted to specifically take a break and highlight him here, as well as what he does for himself, separate from Dead Air. Census Designated, both thematically and aesthetically, inspires my photography deeply. Jane Remover's music and Brendon Burton's photography both fill me with the desire to create every time I'm lucky enough to experience them. There's something about this project that just draws me in, and it has impacted me immensely since hearing it for the first time 7 or 8 months ago. I'm obsessed with the concept of abandoned things. Abandoned places, people, feelings, identities. I'm enthralled by the idea that we create something wholeheartedly or exist in a state of being, and something internal or external causes us to just up and leave it behind. In my photography, something that I only started doing maybe 6 months ago now, I mostly capture abandoned places. These places, found through urban exploring and the chatter of the internet, are the manifestation of the abstract idea of abandonment. They are the physical, tangible proof that we, as human beings, never truly change at our core. We make things, we have relationships and experiences, yet we always inevitably leave them behind. Sometimes we live there mentally, sure, but everything still erodes. Every feeling you have ever had is fleeting. Whether that abandonment is through life or death, it's all the same. We let things grow over, crack, break, disintegrate, and fade into history. We do this with ourselves as well, growing and evolving as people, just to end up wishing that those previous versions of ourselves could disappear for good. It's another reason I'm so drawn to Jane Remover as an artist. While Census Designated was their attempt to become a jack of all trades, in their current work, they continue to sample themselves. They reuse old producer tags, continue to remix motifs, and take new angles on themes that they've already used previously. They've changed as a person pretty much completely, but refuse to let the other versions of themselves die out. Everything is a response to who they used to be and where they continue to go. The fragility of where and how we exist in the world, as corny and cliche as this is really scary. But seeing someone cling to their ability to not only continue growing, but to continue honoring themselves and the previous versions that exist of them is really comforting. Census Designated as an album, concept, and piece of art captures this in a way that I have never felt before. It evokes the feelings that I, until now, could not put into words or express myself. Watching interviews with Jane about this, they say the same thing. They felt like Census Designated was, through its sonic landscape, feelings and vibes that they could not place in just words. The looming sense that things can, have, and will continue to fall apart if you're not so incredibly careful, that the world can rupture in a single second, and that you, yes, you personally, cannot do anything to stop that. Sometimes, no matter how hard you try, things still fall apart. You will slip up, you will hurt others, and you will meet people that will hurt you. The consequences of this life can feel absolutely cannibalistic, like they'll morph you and everyone else involved with your life at the very core. The experiences we have in this world force us to grow teeth. They force us to eat both each other and ourselves. The way we live forces a performance on a voyeuristic eye, and we can't help but to express this through metaphors of sex and violence and exploitation. Sometimes we are like a wounded animal, unable to run and forced to ignore the broken leg for the sake of self-preservation, even if it's just for a minute longer. This album got me through one of the worst weeks of my life recently. I hit a rock bottom during the spring semester of my sophomore year, and everything was falling apart completely out of my control. I don't need to get into the details of why this was happening, but it really did feel like my life was over in a way that I had no power to stop. One night, before everything truly went to shit, before the buildup crashed entirely, I made the decision to walk across my college campus at 1 a.m. to sit under the bridge. You know, the one every college campus has where kids go to smoke weed and make out. The one I had quite literally watched old friends smoke under the week prior while being completely sober myself. But this particular night, it was a Tuesday, if that matters, was a little bit different. It was dark, campus was dead, and I just let the album play. Front to back, no interruptions. Census designated Jane's fully aching screams and the noise, despite their guttural emotional resonance, demanding to be heard, had never been so comforting before that night. And I had listened to the album many times before this. The water of the stream in front of me was running, the air smelled like smoke, and all I could do was feel it. I was forced to sit and feel it. The themes had never felt so real, and I never want to scream so badly myself, something that I never do, something that I couldn't do. So I just let them do it for me. I saw Jane Remover at the Turn Up or Die tour 3 days later in Boston, and that was one of the most cathartic shows I have ever been to in my entire life. I genuinely believe that night, the college experience that I've had so far, the people that I've had both the pleasure and displeasure of meeting, and Census designated as an album have collectively changed me as a person. Not in a way where I act any different or that my mindset has changed, but in a way where I feel things louder than I ever have. This experience, for better or for worse, will stick with me forever. It has and will continue to impact the way I see the world, the way I feel my feelings, and the way I process both the way that I am treated and the way that I treat other people. It has truly, fundamentally changed me. Census Designated is about a lot of things. It's about trauma, substance abuse, sexuality, gender identity, gender dysphoria, complex relationships, intrusive thoughts, and deep, uncomfortable desire. It shows this through its sonic elements, but also through its visuals and lyrics. Census Designated is the physical manifestation of an abstract feeling that everyone has had, and I will forever be grateful to it for filling a gap within me that I didn't realize was even there to begin with. There is art out there for you. There is art that is created around what you've experienced and art that represents feelings you previously could not place. Even if it isn't them, you will find your own Jane Remover, someone who speaks directly to you and the experiences that you've gone through and the way that you live your life. Life doesn't end just because shit hit the fan, even if you have to have your own bridge moment. Even if it takes sitting in a field, recording a video essay that you saw in a dream during a manic episode. If it isn't this album, your Census Designated is waiting for you. You just have to go and find it. Thank you so much for watching. The link to the full interview with Brendon Burton will be linked below in a Google Doc, as well as the full Census Designated photo shoot in high quality. If you want to support me financially so that I can keep upping the ante of these videos and doing stupid shit like going to a farm in the middle of New Jersey, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Thank you so much to all my current patrons whose names are listed on the screen. That could be you next time. It costs less than a coffee. I'm really bad at pitching this. Go do that, I guess. Some other ways that you can support me without spending any money are by subscribing to the channel, sharing the video, and following me on my other social media platforms, which, as per usual, are all linked below. Also, Jane Remover, if you're watching this, which I hope you're not, but if you're watching this, big fan, love your work. I'm fundamentally a different person after hearing Census Designated. I've learned too much about myself. Here we are. So, thanks for that, I guess.